lawyers and former immigration officials who've spoke to the Wall Street Journal, who also say that border agents are more frequently detaining people, with them also noting that officials are now requiring most immigration applicants to submit their social media handles with applications, and they've been increasingly searching people's cell phone contents at airports as well. And all of this may be in response to one of Trump's day one executive orders calling on immigration officials to apply what they referred to as enhanced vetting measures to visa and green card applicants, including immigrants re-entering the country, with lawyers also telling the Journal that the directive appears to have put pressure on officials to find more violators, with the goal of tightening restrictions on who is allowed into the country. Though I will say, with that, of course, Germans are far from the only ones being caught up in this. We're also seeing things like a British tourist being detained by US authorities for 10 days, reportedly due to the fact that she was planning to stay with a host family in exchange for helping out around the house and not having a work visa. There was also the case of Jasmine Mooney, the Canadian who was in an American Pie video and said she was held for 12 days in rough conditions, shackled at certain times. And actually, on that note, you had Canadian MP Charlie Angus today calling on Canadians to avoid travel to the United States if at all possible.
We have seen too many stories of citizens being pulled out of airport lines and being fingerprinted and deported as though they were criminals. Citizens being kidnapped through illegal detention by ICE. And it's not just Canadians. We see the attack on backpackers, students, doctors, professors.
And with that, Angus also calling on his government to, quote, stand up for its citizens who are being denied their rights through arbitrary detention in the United States.
People whose phones are being seized and searched for any kind of incriminating evidence that they're somehow progressive or woke. That's not the actions of a democratic nation. That is the creep of totalitarianism. That is the creep of fascism, and we need to call that out.
But then from that, moving on to France, we're learning about a French scientist reportedly denied entry to the United States after immigration officers searched his phone and found messages expressing criticism of the Trump administration, with an unnamed source reportedly telling the French news agency AFP that the individual underwent a random check on arrival, during which his work computer and personal phone were searched, and authorities claiming that they found messages that expressed hatred towards Trump and can be qualified as terrorism, with them also reportedly confiscating his professional and personal equipment and sending him back to Europe the following day. You also had another source reportedly telling AFP that authorities accused the French researcher of hateful and conspiratorial messages, and actually with that, claiming he was briefly being the subject of an FBI investigation until those charges were dropped following his expulsion. However, according to the French Minister of Higher Education and Research, who said the scientist had been on assignment for the French National Center for Scientific Research and traveling to a conference near Houston, that researcher had simply sent messages, quote, expressing a personal opinion on the Trump administration's research policy. And of course, with that, unless there's more information that's set to come out, many would say that the possibility that criticism of Trump has been equated to terrorism is pretty fucking terrifying. Though it also may be, in the eyes of some, unsurprising considering how we've seen the question of free speech become central in other high-profile immigration cases, or with some of those not involving people entering the country, but people already living here, such as Mahmoud Khalil, or the detained Palestinian activist and legal permanent resident who still hasn't been charged with any crime, with him instead being deemed deportable on the basis of a little-known provision in the Immigration and Nationality Act giving the Secretary of State the discretion to deport non-citizens if there is, quote, reasonable ground to believe that their presence or activities in the United States would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States. But in any case, a key thing here is that following Khalil's detention, Trump promised that it was the first arrest of many to come. And it appears that we are seeing that now as immigration authorities have detained a Georgetown graduate student by doubling down on the same questionable legal argument that they used to justify Khalil's detention. Right? And so this person is Badr Khan Suri. He's reportedly an Indian citizen in the United States on a valid J1 student visa, and his area of study is reportedly peace building in Iraq and Afghanistan, with DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin alleging on X that Suri was actively spreading Hamas propaganda and promoting anti-Semitism on social media. They're going on to say that they have close connections to a known or suspected terrorist who is a senior advisor to Hamas. So this also, as Suri reportedly has no criminal record, has not been charged with a crime yet, and his lawyer said that Suri denied all of the allegations in McLaughlin's statement, with that lawyer then adding that he believed the accusations against Suri were seemingly based on who his father-in-law was. Which I will say, with that, his wife's dad is reportedly a former advisor to the Hamas leader whom Israel assassinated last year in Iran. However, you also have people noting that the dad has said that Suri was not involved in any political activism, including on behalf of Hamas, with him also having left his position in the Hamas-run government in Gaza more than a decade ago, does not currently hold a senior position within the group, and has in fact publicly criticized Hamas's decision to attack Israel on October 7th, 2023. With all this, you also had Georgetown saying in a statement that it was not aware of Mr. Suri engaging in any illegal activity, and we have not received a reason for his detention, and adding, we support our community members' rights to free and open inquiry, deliberation, and debate, even if the underlying ideas may be difficult, controversial, or objectionable. With him adding, we expect the legal system to adjudicate this case this fairly. And this is his lawyer also released a statement saying, seeing our government abduct and jail another innocent person is beyond contemptible. And if an accomplished scholar who focuses on conflict resolution is whom the government decides is bad for foreign policy, then perhaps the problem is with the government, not the scholar. But with all that said, as we wait to see more stories like this, if they're going to come out or not, as well as if more information comes from the stories we even talked about today, I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here? Because in addition to this being a news show where we're talking about what's happening, how it's being covered, what people are saying, that also includes you. I want this to be a conversation. In fact, some of your comments and replies on today's show may be in the next show and commentary, which we include at the end. But then from that, we gotta talk about the news that the Tesla backlash appears to only be growing and the whole situation in general appears to be escalating. But I mean, just yesterday, we talked about some of the reactions and coverage of Tesla stock falling in recent months, as well as nationwide protests against the company and a string of vandalism attacks targeting Tesla centers and dealerships. And just last night after the show, the FBI deputy director wrote that our teams are actively working on the Tesla incidents and the swatting incidents along with our other responsibilities to keep the homeland safe. With that just being one of many responses we've seen to the news, with, for example, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick also going on Fox News last night and not only condemning vandalism, but telling Americans to just straight out buy the stock.
I mean, this is just so outrageous. You have probably the best entrepreneur, the best technologist, the best leader of any set of companies in America working for America, and you have this sort of weird side of the Democratic Party attacking him. If you want to learn something on this show tonight, buy Tesla. It's unbelievable that this guy's stock is this cheap. It'll never be this cheap again.
But they're seeing places like CNBC noting that having a cabinet member endorse a company's stock is a highly unusual move, with the outlet also adding that the conflict of interest rules prevent federal employees from using their roles to, quote, endorse any product, service, or enterprise, save for very limited situations, none of which appeared to apply to Lutnick. Though one, just to insert my opinion here, not that surprising. I mean, just the other day, Trump turned the fucking White House into a Tesla dealership. Though also, too, back to the news, it does not appear the endorsement helped that much, because as of this morning, Tesla stock took another dip. Though I will say, I'm recording this as the markets are still open. In the afternoon, there was some upward fluctuation, though it was still down a hair. And this after yesterday was actually a good day for Tesla, but it's actually down 5% over the last 5 days, and it's down nearly 40% since the start of 2025. But connected to that, we talked about the likes of Tim Walz joking about Tesla's stock plummeting, saying that looking at his little stock app, it gives him a little boost. With some seemingly loving that pettiness, but then tons of others slamming him for celebrating the fall of an American company. What we've seen since is that discourse just continuing to grow, with a ton of people chiming in on both sides. Or with this, for example, seeing the likes of Andrew Schulz going on Theo Vaughn's podcast yesterday and saying it's not fair to root for Tesla as a whole to fail, even if you don't like Elon.
Yes, I understand that he's antagonizing people. He's like rubbing people the wrong way. You don't like the guy. You don't like the beliefs. You don't like what he's doing. And there are things to criticize. I'm not saying there aren't things to criticize. Like nobody's above criticism. But to punish that car company that is 100% made in America, made by people living in America, Americans rely on those jobs. Like maybe we criticize another thing.
Right.
Like, what is your goal? That we shut down those factories and those Americans lose those jobs? That makes you feel better about your gripe with Elon?
And in addition to that, you also had the House Judiciary Republicans writing that it is disgusting for Democrats to root against Tesla. But then notably, there's also been some backlash, or at least scoffing to that backlash, for two reasons. We had some noting that, one, that if the concern is that Americans are losing their jobs, well, that's why some people are mad at Elon in the first place. And then also, two, you had a lot of people saying that a number of the people and groups that are outraged about people rooting for Tesla's failure, they are the same people who have rooted for the failure of or boycotted companies that are either American and or employ a lot of Americans. With us seeing, for example, Bud Light actually trending on Twitter this morning as people noted conservatives previously boycotted and raged against the company after it partnered with a trans content creator, and Kid Rock even shot cans of the beer. Or with the boycott impacting sales and distributors, and at the time that same House Judiciary GOP account tweeted, Bud Light, Disney, Target, go woke, go broke. And so we're seeing that whole back and forth playing out there. But then that also brings us to the last piece of Tesla news, which is that there is now a major Cybertruck recall, with this impacting essentially all Cybertrucks sold in the first 15 months that the car has entered the US market. Meaning we're talking about over 46,000 vehicles, though the company estimates that only around 1% will actually have the defect at issue. Or with that reportedly being a part called the cant rail, which is a stainless steel exterior trim panel that can apparently delaminate and detach from the vehicle, with then that detached panel possibly becoming a road hazard and increasing the risk of accidents. So you have Tesla now offering service free of charge to replace that part. And all of this is notably there have been a handful of Cybertruck recalls since since it hit the market. And then we'll get to more news in just a moment, but I gotta tell you about today's sponsor because they have completely changed my household's bread game. So not just bread, we're talking pasta, pastries, all the comfort foods that we love, but not what you're used to. Or because I'm talking about Wild Grain, the first bake from frozen subscription box for sourdough breads, artisanal pastries, and fresh pastas. And what blew my mind is that these aren't your average frozen foods. Wild Grain partners with small bakeries across the country, supporting local businesses while delivering next level nutrition. And one of the things I really love is their sourdough actually goes through a slow fermentation process that's easier on your digestive system and packed with more nutrients than store-bought bread, which for me sounds like a hall pass. But also, it's for everyone. You want a gluten-free box? They've got you. Fully plant-based? Absolutely. You can literally build a